Welcome, welcome, welcome to another Sunday of When Black Women Gather. My name is Helen Higginbotham. I am the founder of this organization, and we gather on Sundays to talk about all kinds of things that are affecting us as a community, most often as Black women, but very often we also invite other folks into our circle, sometimes Black men, sometimes white women, and we try to have lucrative and informative conversations. Today, we have two guests. You all are familiar with Wanda, but we also have Miss Jacalyn, and they are going to talk to us about the financial state of things. Wanda reached out to me and wanted to talk about where is Black net wealth going to be in 2053? The projection is bleak. So they are going to talk to us about that situation. I asked her to please let's throw in, it's election time. We got to talk about the election that's coming up and what is our responsibility. Because we got to change our way of thinking to try and have any success at reversing this. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Wanda Honore, who you all know, and she will introduce Jacalyn. Jacalyn, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us today. And I look forward to being educated too. So I'm going to bow out, but I will be here on the background managing the chats and ask everybody except our two speakers to please put yourself on mute. And thank you, ladies, again.
Okay, well, thanks again, Helen, for allowing me the opportunity to do what I have a passion for doing, which is talking about financial literacy. And this time it's just a little different because we're going to be talking about how the upcoming election is going to play a role in the future of African American wealth. And you mentioned something about it's a bleak prediction that I wanted to bring to the attention that has been circulating for a number of years, but I don't want to look at it as something that we can't reverse if we are aware of it and if we take action. And that's the whole point, especially for our younger generation. Even though we may not have very many young people on right now, most of us either have daughters, sons, nieces, nephews, or just young people that we mentor, and it's very important that we continue to talk to them, pass information on, and make sure that the narrative is going to change for the future. Just a little bit about myself for those of you who may not have heard me speak before. My name is Wanda Honore, as Helen has said, and I have been on this road to financial education, literacy, and for the last 7 years. And I started this journey as a result of my own personal situation as a 50-something-year-old woman that had done all the things that, we looked to do back in the day, real estate, businesses, stocks, you name it. And there was one key component that was missing that I did not know. And as a result, I made a lot of mistakes. And I was fortunate to have the ability to have a couple of do-overs, so to speak. But when I got in my 50s, obviously, I was pretty well at that point. There is no more time that I have to waste. I have got to figure this out. And fortunately, there were some very special people that I was introduced to actually via listening to the radio. We have one Black radio station here I'm in the Los Angeles area, and that's Stevie Wonder's radio station. And I received some information doing a Christian broadcast, actually, that I did not anticipate. I was actually at work, had gone back to work after, unfortunately, having to deal with my finances changing from the last thing was the real estate market. crashing. And so I found myself back working and not happy, but at the same time, not knowing what else I was going to do. And so as I heard this information, I was kind of skeptical. And then I said, well, what do I have to lose? And that was a good decision for me. And that's sometimes, we have to kind of, at least listen, because I think that opens up the door to be able to make to hear things that can help you make better decisions. And unfortunately, I had been beat down a little bit financially, but I had not closed my ears, and I was able to listen. I followed up with the persons because the services they provided were free, and that was a key for me because I didn't have any money. And fast forward, I not only found this information to be something that literally changed my life and helped me to no longer continue to work, but also it was something that I decided I wanted to do for the next at least 20 years of my life, to be able to hopefully reach young people are my passion, but at the same time, I know there are other people like myself who are thinking, what can I do? I'm at a certain age. I didn't do certain things when I was going to do them or thought I should do them or didn't know about it. And what can I do now? I don't want to risk my money. I don't want to be in a situation where I put anything that I have at risk, but at the same time, I don't want to not have enough of what I need, and that's a big thing of having not having enough income to last your years, which is something that I've had to think about. And so as a result, this information is something that I try and encourage people of all ages, especially people in of my age range, which I am now. Actually, tomorrow I'll be 63. So I am. I don't even know where the years went, but in any event, all of a sudden, I was 30, and then now I'm 60. So who knew, But I'm also blessed. Thank you. I'm also blessed to be here because there's a lot of people that didn't. And the bigger blessing is to know that I'm going to be all right. And that's the key because it's a worse blessing to be alive and the age of my life and not have a clue as to what my financial future is going to be. And obviously, your financial future kind of controls the rest of how you're going to live. And so, as this prediction has been circulating about African American wealth being, or African Americans having a net worth of zero in 2053. It's something that has very much troubled me because, first of all, I was thinking, well, how could that possibly be? I mean, we actually have enough money to make up, as I used to say, one of the seventh largest economies. So how can our net worth go to zero? And we know the last time our net worth was zero, I'm sure most of you we weren't around, but we know was when we were working for free. So what has happened? What changed? And what can we do about it? And when they talk about it, and this is a study that has been done by a nonprofit called Prosperity Now, which has been over the last uh, tens of years, done studies on economic empowerment throughout the country and especially in communities of color. And so this prediction is based on what's the trends that are happening with our spending and the decline in the amount of money that is going through our community. And so it's something that we all need to be concerned with because even if we don't have our own children, we want to hopefully, do something that's going to make sure that the generations to come will be in a better situation. And a lot of that has to do with our habits and the fact that, we have a lot of stuff, but that stuff doesn't have any real value when it comes down to it in terms of generating wealth. It's generating liabilities for us, and we've got to be thinking. And then with this election that's coming up, it's something that is we have to be thinking. Obviously, most people that look like me, they're automatically going to want to vote for Kamala and the Democratic ticket. But at the same time, there are others that are thinking that the other party has the answers. And what we have to really be thinking is who is going to help put us in a better situation than we are, and help us move forward. And so, what I'm going to do is just kind of talk about the whole situation that we're dealing with right now, with the election, and how that has an impact on our future wealth. And then I was lucky enough to get a young lady to join me, Miss Jacalyn, that I'll introduce in a short time. And she is going to talk more about how can we reverse this. And then also, love to hear from those of you here about um, your thoughts. What are you doing? What are you, whether you believe that this prediction is accurate? It is a study that was done as an independent agency, and it's being publicized in Forbes, as well as Black Enterprise and several other financial publications. But this is something that this particular group has been doing over the years, and so there really is no investment in them making the prediction, just to make it, to say something negative. They're basically trying to sound the alarm, so to speak. And so, anyhow, this is get this together. Okay, so as we talk about 2024 election and African American net worth, and I'm sorry, okay, here we go. So in terms of looking at our current situation, and I don't have a whole lot of slides that I'm going to be using. I do sometimes do, but I want to really more or less have a conversation about this, because right now our net worth, a medium net worth, is $24,000, far below what many white households' net worths are. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are not homeowners in the numbers that others are, and that has created a major challenge. They did do a reduction in the interest rate, which hopefully is going to make some improvements. But I mean, I was looking, and obviously I live in a much higher area in terms of housing and everything in California, and just in the Los Angeles area. And in the area that I live in, there is a home that one of my girlfriends, who's a real estate agent, is selling, and it is being sold for $2 million. And there was a loan person there that was helping people to understand what they needed to do to qualify for that. And it was just unbelievable what I was seeing, because the person would have to put down 20%. So 20%, if that house sold for 2 million, of 2 million, we're talking what, $400,000 that the person would need to put down. And based on the rate that they were showing, and I think it's somewhere around 5 point something, it was around $11,000 a month that family would have to be able to pay. In addition to, obviously, that's not including taxes, it's not including furnishing, and then most homes, they have some repairs and things. And so, who is really able to afford a home like that? Now, obviously, where I live, it's a little different than where other people may live. I just left from Atlanta. I know the homes there are quite a bit less. In fact, I was going to buy a home years ago, but there are, it's still also relative to what the salaries are in certain areas, because obviously California, we have a higher pay for our from our employers, and so we are able to some extent afford a little bit more. But even with that amount is something that the house that I'm in, which is the house that my mother owned and passed down to myself and my sister, and I had the wherewithal to not want to sell it. I kept it. And as a result, this home that was $20,000 is now in a $1 million range. And, obviously there were things that were done to increase make repairs and so on and so forth. And so there was refinancing that took place, and probably some monies that were taken out that unfortunately at the time I didn't realize I probably should never have done, because now I do have a larger mortgage than obviously I not obviously, but than I would like to have had. But just the fact that I still have this home, and it was only $20,000 back in the 70s, and now we're over $1 million, is something that, if we are understanding this, is one key factor in what we can do in regards to being able to help reverse that prediction of keeping our homes, and then also helping our young people or each other, because there are other communities that do work together, to be able to afford homes. And we've got to be thinking, what are the ways that we can help each other, and be able, whether it be multi-families. Out here, they do something called an accessory dwelling, which we call ADU, which now anything that you build where you have other people living, it falls under that. But back in the day, it was just having different families maybe share some of the space in the home. And, I know at one point I never thought that that would be something that I'd be thinking about, but it's something that's very practical in this day and time. Because if we don't start understanding what we're doing, what we can do, and the tools that we have available that are going to help us, how are we going to ever change the situation that we're currently in? And so some of these things I've already kind of talked about, but in terms of income, we know that our income, lacks behind others in this society in many ways. When we look for jobs, we are still discriminated against, even though they supposedly have this algorithms or whatever, where they put your resume in, and but they some kind of way seem to be able to still figure out, who we are. And so at times that kind of like doesn't allow us to land the job. Or when we do get the job, we find out down the line that we're making quite a bit less. These may be some of the things that you've experienced yourself. And I have actually just talked to a friend of mine who's told me that her son, who's in the management, he continually is quitting jobs because he doesn't want to work for less than what he feels he's worth. Well, that's great. He's millennial, and that's great that he has that mindset. But then one of the things that we have to think about, if you keep quitting jobs, and at some point he's 38 years old, then what happens when you look toward the age that I'm at and you have no retirement put together? Because obviously right now, most of us, if we have a retirement or a pension of some type of sort, it's from what? Our job. So we have to be thinking, if we want to have the freedom to, be able to quit jobs and do things like that, are we then saving in other ways that's going to allow us to be in that position that we can do that? Housing discrimination, not being able to get into certain neighborhoods. This neighborhood that I'm in now was predominantly white. It's actually now being gentrified, and it is, I would say, a good 40% white now. And you can see the signs in another 5 to 10 years, it's probably going to be close to 70% or more, white. And most people that look like me will not be able to afford to get back here. Student loans, that's a major situation that we got to be thinking about, because, we tell our children to go to school, and then when they get out of school, the student loan debt prevents them from being able to move forward, because the jobs a lot of times they get are not giving them the amount of money they need. And then if they want to purchase a home, they have to deal with the student loan debt. I have a close friend now that, because of student loan debt, A, she never received her degree from USC, and B, that has student loan debt is something that's like it just never goes away. That's one of those debts that you can't do anything about, and it is literally killing our people because most of the times when we go to school, we have to get loans, you know, and so as a result, we are not also passing down generational wealth, and so as we look at things that we need to think about in regards to reversing that, we got to be thinking, a, if I'm a homeowner or if I'm not a homeowner, what am I doing to maintain that home, and what am I doing to make sure that my children and others are going to be in a position to do that. What about debt? Are we living through our credit cards? Our credit cards, are they our savings? Because credit cards, are being marketed to our young people before they get out of high school good. And are we teaching them how to properly utilize a credit card before they do get themselves in debt? Because they'll have bad credit scores before they even understand what credit is, and that's very, very important. And then investments, you know, we know that stocks have always been around, and there's some people that have done very well. We hear about cryptocurrency, and some of us may be invested in cryptocurrency or bitcoins and things of that nature. But when we get involved, are we listening to other people and hoping and trusting that they know what they're talking about, or are we actually learning about it and really taking the time? Even in real estate, I had 7 properties, and I got involved in the real estate market when it was booming in 2008. And out of those 7 properties, I was just blessed to keep my own property because when the market crashed, everything crashed along with it. And I was in this group called the No Brainer Real Estate Investments, and it was a black woman that was over the group, and it was actually I was introduced to a larger group that was in the Los Angeles area, and I would go to to the meetings and learn and what have you. But there was no safeguard in place for what was going to happen when this market crashed, and literally every last property that I had attained, except for the home that I have now, and I just fought and fought and fought to keep it, was basically went down like a dominoes. And so I thought I was doing the right thing in trying to acquire wealth. Retirement. you know I didn't understand that my pension was one of the most important things that I should have cherished. And I'm saying that because I worked for 17 years in law enforcement, and I had a pension with PERS. And when I left to do something that I felt was more significant, which was about, again, helping people that look like me, and I was I was talked into turning my pension into an IRA that would be able to grow, but it would also allow me access. Now I'm in my 20s. I'm figuring, what do I need a pension for right now? I need to have money where if I want to make some investments, I think a business, I had another business going at the time. I had a brick and mortar business, that this was going to be the best situation. And, and my financial advisor, he had to know what he was talking about, right? Well, ask me about how I feel about it now at 63 with no pension and having to, I just changed it, but I was actually paying $600 for my medical. And so, these are things that because we are not knowledgeable and we are not getting the information, there are mistakes that we make because one, we don't know where to get the information sometimes. And two, when we do get information, we keep it to ourselves. And that's something that we've got to be thinking, how can we do something different to improve the situation? And so, as Helen, was talking to me about the election situation, and so we have to be thinking about, based on what we kind of know about the candidates, here are some key thoughts that we may think about. Kamala is looking at affordable housing. She's looking at student loan forgiveness and support for Black-owned businesses. I have a girlfriend in Houston right now who every time the weather or storm or something happens, it really sets her back. But when she looks for assistance, she may get a grant, and that grant takes forever and it's very little. And the other businesses seem to be in a position to get a lot more assistance. And she's just barely holding on. But she's doing everything she can. She has the structure right. She knows what she's doing as a business owner, but she just doesn't seem to be able to get a break. But then we have Mr. Trump here. He's looking at tax cuts. Well, her business is not going to be one that's going to fall along those tax cuts because of the amount of money that she has. And how many of us are going to benefit and have benefited in the past when he made those tax cuts? Deregulation. Well, I can tell you right now that her living in Houston, she can tell you what deregulation has done, because every time a storm hits, and because it's been privatized, they have a problem where you will have blocks of that will have power, and then in the center of that block there will be persons that don't have power, and it's no rhyme or reason of how things are put together. And so this is part of this privatization where they have no control over how things are being done in regards to some of the most crucial things that everyone needs, which is our utilities. And then business friendly policies. Yes, he probably will be more business friendly. And I think a lot of people that look like us are thinking, okay, this is something where, maybe the Democrats are not as supportive as maybe Mr. Trump is. But I would say that we really have to look at what businesses are those that are really going to benefit from those policies. And so when we look at the approaches that um, Harris versus Trump, um, Harris is more focusing on being able to provide financial resources for marginalized communities. But when we look at Trump and the MAGA approach, and I know we've heard this, how many people have said, how many times have we heard, you need to figure it out, you need to stop asking for handouts, you need to pull yourself up on your bootstraps, when we know that the very persons that are saying this are the very ones that take advantage of these very same programs that they don't allow us to get. And when they have cuts that are being provided, tax cuts and benefits, they are the ones that are getting the biggest benefit. And so we have got to be looking at where are the challenges when it comes down to who is going to be, or what the benefits of who is going to be our next president, and how is that going to help us. Nobody has, to me, the best answer for everything, especially when it comes down to our community. But we have to be looking at what does that approach, what does approach that they're using have to do with our future, and is that going to help this prediction of our wealth being net zero, or is it going to help to start reversing? And that's something that we have definitely got to be taken into consideration. Trying to forward my slide. Sorry. Give me 1 second. My slide deck is not moving properly. Oops. Let me stop share for a second. Okay. So while I'm pulling these other slides back up, is there anyone that maybe has any comments or anything that they can share in regards to what they see as the current situation in regards to this election and our financial picture? Anybody want to share anything? Okay. If not, give me 1 second and I should be back in. Okay. All right, here we go. So what I am going to can everybody okay, what I'm going to do at this time, because I think I've kind of talked about some of the things that we have to kind of look at, and look at the differences in the candidates, and know that that is going to be very important, because um, if we continue to go the opposite direction from where we need to go, then we're going to be in a situation where people will not be able to get out of this rut. We are already kind of looking at a situation where we our mindset of how we spend, of how we think about money, of how we think about wealth, of this microwave uh, type of society where everything has to be fast, and we don't understand that sometimes when you're building something, it has got to be something that we have got to take the time to build. Money, like people used to say back in the day, money doesn't grow on trees. And we've got to teach our children from when they're young, that if you start saving, you start understanding the proper way to save, and things that you can do better, then when you get to be an adult, you'll be in a much better situation. And even though you might have had to wait, that wait is going to be well worth it. But in many cases, our young people don't want to wait. And I was one of those young people. So I know, because that's why I did a lot of things that I did, because every scheme, every opportunity to get rich quick, so to speak, I took advantage of, because I thought, oh, this is going to be it, until I didn't have any more money. So, what I'm going to do now is allow for Jacalyn to talk about some things that I think kind of are put things in perspective in regards to how all the different things that we have been doing can be looked at differently, and be used, and tools that can be used to be able to reverse the predictions that we're talking about, or that I've been talking about in the through Prosperity Now and these other publications. And so let me just tell you a little bit about uh, Miss Jacalyn. Um, she is a mother, for one, and she's been married for 36 years, and that's a feat in itself, with three grown children. And she stayed at home as a stay-at-home mom most of her life. And so when we look at people who have financial knowledge and expertise, most times they don't look like Miss Jacalyn. Most times we're looking at old white folk who have been involved as financial advisors, or financial professionals for years. And, they're the ones dictating and telling us, what we should know and what we should do. Well, Jacalyn is someone that has gotten this information because of necessity. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about that. But because of the necessity, to where she realized that being a stay-at-home mom, there were things that she needed to be aware of. And I hope that there are any persons here that are not working, and that are able to be in that situation where they have a spouse that basically handles everything, that they will pay a lot of attention to this, because that's another thing that we have got to look at is, just because we may stay at home, and may not be the main breadwinner, we have to still understand how that money works, because what happens if something happens with that main breadwinner, and what happens if we get a divorce, or what happens, if the what ifs, which we talk about, happen. And so we can't just leave it to just one person. It takes the whole household. It takes the children, because down the line, you know, what happens when we can't do certain things. So anyhow, Miss Jacalyn, now, because of her experiences, has now focused on the same journey that I am kind of focusing on, and that is about how to utilize this information to be able to use, um, to be able to do something differently. And before I go to that, let me see. Miss Helen has some things in the chat. Concerning this high inflation, how does this impact us all? When white folks get a cold, we get a flu. So inflation is definitely a very key part of all that we have to deal with. I had no clue what inflation was until, really, I just tell you, until recently. I really didn't pay attention to inflation. I really didn't believe that it was something that was a major factor. But we've all, I think, even our kids know about inflation, and Jacalyn is definitely going to help us talk about that. Interest rates on these credit cards, again, going back to the fact that these cards are not only marketed to us or early on in life with no education, and then of course we have the highest interest rate. And I see here where Helen, you put 31%. Oh, there we're talking 39% and such. I had one of the cards that I had that just told me, hey, well, you can be thankful you had this 29% interest rate, which I wasn't using it, but thank God. But now it's going up to 39%. So in any event, I'm going to let Miss Jacalyn jump in, and I hope that she's going to have some things to enlighten you, and that elicit some more conversation, because we want, when you finish with this conversation, to hopefully have some really concrete things that you can do that's going to help make some changes in your family as well as in the lives of those that you care about. So Ms. Jacalyn, I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Wanda. And thank you for the invitation to just come in and hang out. You had told me about this group that, that you meet with, and I'm like, wow, okay, that sounds fascinating. Wow. So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience and how I actually got into this industry, or even the passion about it. As a stay-at-home mom, I remember sitting in a workshop or something, and I remember listening to elderly women kind of, they were trying to help these elderly women to not get scammed. And I said, you know what, Lord, if you give me an opportunity to do anything, later on, if I decide to go back to work, or if, I go back to work, I would really like to help educate women, and financially, just so they can understand some of the financial tools and things that are going on, in the world, so that they won't be easily deceived. And that was just me as being a stay-at-home mom. So prior to becoming a stay-at-home mom, I remember, I went to school, I got my degrees, I did all of that because I knocked it out, because I didn't want to have to go back to school with some small kids, right? And so then, before I really, my first child, I guess before she was maybe 1 or 2, I had a real estate broker's license, I had my MBA. I did it all right, right? Okay, so I married, my husband, and he's a software engineer, and so he's got, like this amazing job. And at the time, we had a 2-income family, and we thought everything was great. I mean, we had done everything right. And then I had our first child, and I was like, yeah, no, I didn't have this child so that I could turn her over to somebody else for 9 hours a day. It just didn't work for me. And the Lord laid it on my heart that just wasn't the thing for me. So I ended up staying home. And thankfully, my husband's income, back in the 80s, my husband's income was going up every year. He was getting a raise. He's getting a raise. Well, fast forward 20 years, I'm still at home with the kids, and I'm thinking I'm going to get back into, something. I don't know. I didn't know what I was going to do, but sat down with a friend who really told me, you know what? You need to have someone take a look at your finances. You really need to have some, things have changed, and it's important for you to get your finances looked at to make sure that you're on course, because you're planning to retire and your husband's planning to retire, and you've worked, at that time, I guess he had been in the workforce maybe 25, 30 years. And, it's time for you to have a review. Well, I got my eyes opened on that review, because I thought we were doing everything right. We were doing everything right. We got the education. We got the right job. We moved, to the right neighborhood. We did everything right. And then we found out that there was something seriously wrong, because when they looked at what we had saved, my husband had a 401k, my husband had a pension. He had all the right things. We had saved in a 529 for our kids to go to college. Education is super important. So we had done all the right things. And someone sat us down and said, you know what? All of that money in your retirement savings is not yours. And I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding, because we have been saving for a heck of a long time. And you've got to be kidding me that money is not ours. And they said, yes, the place where you've been saving your money all these years hasn't been taxed yet. So when you go to pull it out in retirement, you're going to pay quite a bit in taxes. And, at the time, I don't know what the tax rate was, maybe 22% or something like that. But then they said, hey, let's take a look let's project, do you think taxes are going to go up or down? And I'm like, well, of course they're going to go up. They're like, okay, well, if your tax rate is 22% right now, and it goes up to 35, goes up to 40%, 40% of what you saved, and we've just projected it out. And at the time, I don't know, it was going to be a million plus, whatever there was going to be in this 401k, barring any dips in the market, right? And I'm like, okay, so if the tax rate goes up to 40%, let's just say 50 for round numbers, okay? So if we have $1 million saved in our 401k and the tax rate goes up to 50%, that means for every dollar we pull out, we're going to pay 50 cents on every dollar. So, okay, wait a minute. So if in California, and I live in Los Angeles, so it costs $100,000 a year to live here, period. So if we have $1 million saved in a 401k and the tax rate is 50%, that means our usable money is 500,000, which means we'll be retired for 5 years, and we have to go back to work. Imagine my shock and awe when I realized that we had been saving in a place that basically, the value of it was going to be eroded just due to taxes. I was shocked. I was livid. Okay. It's like, how come somebody didn't tell me that? And then that part, okay, so the $1 million, okay, so we're thinking we're going to save. So you're telling me that what's on my statement does not belong to me. That's exactly what we're saying, because what's on your statement hasn't been taxed. So that was eye-opening then. Number two, I'm trying to figure out, well, okay, then we had a crash, that 2008 crash, and everybody felt that. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. Where did my money just go? Because at the time, I don't know how much was in that 401k, but I think the 401k, let's just say it was like $450,000 at the time. I remember distinctly that there was only 250, maybe 275 left in that account after that 2008 crash. That was almost half, because that was a 39% crash. That was almost half of what we had saved thus far. And then everybody said, yeah, just let it ride. It'll be back. It'll be back. Well, thankfully, my husband and I had that many more years to go before we retired, that we could actually grow it and let it have enough time to grow, that it could come back, and that would have been great. But think about that was almost 15, 20 years worth of savings that was lost overnight, practically. And I was like, what makes you think I'm going to leave that money with you so you can hold on to it and lose another half of it? I'm like, why doesn't anybody get the fact that this is kind of crazy? Why are we saving in a place where the money can be lost? And that just drove me crazy. And everybody's looking at me like, but it's okay. Just let it, it'll grow back. I'm like, but if you lost it this time, what makes you think that you're not going to lose it again? But okay, I'm the crazy one. All right, fine. So then what I didn't realize at the time was that our kids 529 was also in the stock market account. It was growing based on the S&P. And so at that point, we actually lost half of the value of their 529, which also pissed me off because that was just a few years before our oldest daughter was going to go to college. So we lost half of what was in that account. We ended up having to shift all the money from the baby to the oldest because the oldest was going to need it sooner. And we just figured, okay, we're going to have to try to grow it all anyway. And when she ended up going to college, that kind of set her back too, because there were so many things that were happening that we didn't understand. The fact that the 529, when she got accepted to USC. And when she got accepted to USC, she went down there and she said, you know what, I need financial aid. And they said, well, no, you don't. And she said, well, yes, I do. And they said, well, no, you don't. And she said, well, I have 35,000 and the cost for me to go to SC for a year is 65,000. So I'm going to need some assistance. And they said, well, no, you don't need assistance because you have lots of money. And she said, what do you mean? She said, my 529 says 35,000. And they said, no, 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 you have lots of money. And she says, well, where? And so when you look at her FAFSA, guess what we report on our FAFSA? We report our 401ks and we report all of the savings accounts that we have. That's what FAFSA does. It exposes all of your savings. So if you've done everything right and you've saved for your kids, guess what? They get less in financial aid because you are a great saver. They want to save financial aid for the people who are truly impoverished, which is only fair. I get that. But what about the ones who actually did some savings and try to put money away? So long story short, they told her that after she spent the 401k, the other 529 accounts, then come back to them and talk to them. And she was like, but that's my dad's 401k. That's my brother and sister's 529. What do you mean spend their money? And they said, that's what we mean. You have money. Your parents have saved money. You need to use all of their resources up to go to our school so that then you're going to get a great education and you let them worry about that. And she's like, how could I do that to my family when they've done such a great job saving? So long story short, we had to take a different course of action. And she since graduated from Cal Poly Pomona, and now she's an architect up in San Francisco. So there was a happy ending to the story. But at that time, it was really disappointing to find out that we had spent so much time investing in something that actually ended up not really working for her. Now, here's something else that was happening. I don't know if you all remember, I mean, inflation is a real thing. And I think Helen did mention that in the chat. Inflation is a real thing. And when I realized that inflation was really impacting us is the fact that if you go to the grocery store, like Costco, I'm pretty sure everybody shops at Costco or has. When you went to Costco, when they first opened up, if you spent $100, you had a full basket. Now, if you go to Costco, you walk out of there with 5 things and you just spent $100. It's not even a basket. You can walk out with $100 worth of whatever in your arms. And so inflation is a real thing. And my husband's job, as he's working, he wasn't getting raises anymore. Now, back to the 80s, I realized that, I mean, he was getting raises every year. He was getting raises every year, and it might have been 5%. I don't know what his raises were, but he was keeping ahead of inflation. But when we sat down with this financial, to get this education, we realized my husband hadn't had a raise in over 5 years. The cost of everything was going up by 3.2%, and this was back 80s, 90s, 3.2% consistently. Everything is going up until we hit COVID in 2020, and it actually jumped up to 9%. But if it's averaging 3.2%, that means that your raises every year have to be more in excess of that 3.2%. And if you're not getting a consistent raise of more than 3.2%, you're going behind. And that's what was happening every month. We had more month at the end of the money. It just seemed like we were running out of money on the 28th, on the 25th, on the 21st. Every month, it seemed like we were running out of money faster. And so unless you work somewhere with a cost of living increase, traditional employment doesn't do that. You work for a private employer, you're not getting cost of living increases. In fact, half the time they'll give you a bonus. And guess what happens to a bonus? You get taxed 50% on a bonus. So my husband got lots of bonuses. He'd get like a $3,000 bonus or a $5,000 bonus, but guess what happens? We get taxed 50% on bonuses. So they weren't giving him raises, they were giving him bonuses. And that's what was happening. So inflation was really wrecking our situation. So we had less and less to spend every month. Our purchasing power was going down. Another thing was our compound interest was at risk. As I was saying earlier, our 401k balance got slashed basically in half because of the risk. Where we were saving it, it had risk associated with it. So there was a lot of financial things that were happening, that it was like this tsunami that was happening that we just were not prepared for. We thought everything was going to continue to go as it was from the 80s, and everything changed dramatically in the 90s and into the 2000s. So let's just say, what could be done about that? And that's what happened after we had that financial education. And I'm like, okay, what can we do? Well, there are several things we could do. We could save in a place that has a floor, like let's say old 401ks, old savings accounts. They can be put into accounts that never lose money, because Warren Buffett, he's very famous for saying his rule number one is never lose money. Rule number two, go back to rule number one. Well, if he's like the fourth wealthiest man in the world, you would think that if he's saying that, there has to be a place where you don't lose money. And that's true. There are places where you can save money, where you never lose money, where you can get that same rate of return, that same compound interest, and not lose money. The reason why people like 401ks is because they get compound interest. They get interest on the principal and they get interest on the interest. That's why people like it. But what if you could get that same kind of return on your savings as you do in your 401k and never lose any money? That was something that was eye-opening. That's something we learned in that review. We also found out that it's important to get, cost of living increases, right? Or at least have your money making more than the inflation rate. Another thing that we realized is that we kept refinancing our home. And what we're finding is that when you refinance, you need mortgage protection on that home. When we refinance in our 50s, a 30-year refi in our 50s, that means that we'll be 80 when we finish paying that house off. And some of us pass away, sadly, before we hit that 80. Well, what's happening then? Either the spouse, if that person is married, doesn't have enough income to pay the mortgage now. In their 60s, 70s, and 80s, they don't have enough money to pay it off. Or the breadwinner or whoever is paying for it passes away and the kids are not able to pick it up, because the legislation here is all of a sudden you can't like inherit stuff and have it on the same property tax thing. That's a whole nother conversation. But bottom line is the kids aren't prepared to purchase the home or pick up the mortgage payments or, take care of it. Maybe they have their own home already. So now this home that is just about paid off, it's lost. And you talk about gentrification. Guess what? That's when you get those fire sales, because the kids do not have enough money to pay off the property taxes, to keep up the maintenance on the house. They don't even know how to save enough to qualify for a loan to take care of that house. So we got a lot of financial issues going on. So we can see that there's that we need a lot more education on real estate and on mortgage protection. Everyone should have some type of a protection to pay off the house in full in the event that they pass away before they paid it off. Okay, that's that. There's another thing. We need to start utilizing the compound interest savings that wealthy people use. We need to teach our kids the difference between simple interest and compound interest. Wealthy people use compound interest all day, every day. They talk about it all the time. Our kids don't know the difference. So that's something that needs to be discussed. How to pass on generational wealth. Why is it that we pass away and we don't share financial education with our kids, and our kids have to start all over from ground zero? When they get a job, they get an education, and now they got to save up and start all over. We need a plan for passing wealth on to our kids. And lastly, I would say, oh, credit cards. You had mentioned credit cards. Credit cards, when you say compound interest, meaning multiplying your money, getting money on the principal plus the interest, that's working for us in reverse. You notice how they offer credit cards to our kids as soon as they get out of college, or as soon as they get into college, all of a sudden they get offered these instant approval credit cards. Well, that whole 39% that Wanda mentioned earlier is working against our kids. So if you understand the rule of 72, 70, let's say 40% goes into 70, like 2.5 years. Okay, so that means that someone who has a credit card interest of 39%, it's gonna double, the balance on it is gonna double in 2.5 years, and they know it. So let's just say you have a more reasonable credit card interest, like 22%. 22 into 72, you're talking 3.5 years. So 3.5 years, your balance on your credit card is going to double. So what if you don't pay it off in full, that $500 that you bought that TV with is going to balloon into $1,000 in 3 years. And it's going to balloon into $2,000 3 years later. So you have to understand how compound interest is working against us. And we need to warn our kids of that. So that's something else that we really need to talk about. And business ownership is another key element when it comes to building wealth. Because if you understand that the IRS, the entire tax system is based on, it's favorable to businesses. And so business owners understand that they get tax breaks for being a business owner. Individuals do not. Individuals were never supposed to pay tax into the IRS system, but somebody got that harebrained idea. But anyway, so if you understand that business owners get tax breaks, that's why it's important in your portfolio to, if you can, structure some type of business income so you can offset your W-2 income. Because as we all know, no one ever got wealthy working for somebody else. So the wealthy people who are wealthy in this country are business owners. And even if it's a side business or something like that, you need to take advantage of business, of the tax breaks for business owners so that you can keep more money in your pocket. So there's a lot of things that went into my eye-opening awakening. But as Wanda and I like to do, we like to talk a lot. So anytime that you want to hear more about, strategies or what it is that we could do to benefit our families and to pass on generational wealth and to build wealth to be able to hang on to these houses, hey, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to talk, because as you can tell, I can gab all day, but I'm gonna slow it down right quick in case somebody has any questions. I didn't read the notes in the chat, but I'm gonna check it out. Let's see, what did we have in the chat? Wanda, let's see, did you want to wrap it up? Let's see. Where was that? Where's the place for saving? Oh yeah, mortgage protection, is it prohibitive? It depends. It really depends. So that's kind of a case by case basis. We'd have to check it out. Is there ever a time when it doesn't make sense to purchase a home? Yeah, sometimes you might be better off waiting, for a couple of years. It depends on where we are in the cycle. It depends on, how much you could save on the down payment. Maybe you could multiply that down payment and create even more wealth in the time that you wait before you purchase it. Isn't that case now? That's cute. Yeah, I would probably agree with you, Helen. I probably would. I would say trust and annuities. Definitely, I'd be happy to talk about that. Trust for sure. I mean, anyone. If you have property, if you have children, I highly recommend. I mean, even if you're single and you have a lot of debt, or not a lot of debt, you owe money. I would really, really highly recommend that you talk with someone about getting a living trust. Why? Because you need to specify what to do with your estate. You'd be better off spending a couple $1,000s, if it's that, a couple $1,000s to make your own decisions and put things in place rather than let the state come in and divvy up everything you've worked so hard for. So that's that's my PSA there. Annuities, definitely could talk about annuities, but annuities are, I mean, I like annuities. I do like annuities, and there are some amazing annuities out there, annuities that grow just like being in a regular 401k. They grow and they have no loss. That's called like a fixed index annuity. There's a lot of great products out there. There's guaranteed interest and all sorts of stuff. So if you want to talk about specifics, I'll be happy to talk to you about that offline. But I really, really like, I do like annuities, but it depends on what the situation is. And we do that on a case-by-case basis. We assess what it is that's going on and what you desire to do with your money. And then we make recommendations on how to get it done. So we help you create like your financial roadmap, and then you decide where you want your money to go. And we just give you some assistance on, how does that look? So, and our consultations are free. So we're more than happy to do that. So we get paid really well from the companies that we represent. IULs. Oh, you want to talk about IULs? Oh my gosh, how exciting is that? But again, I don't think I was really supposed to talk about that kind of stuff right today, but invite me back. I'll be happy to talk about that. Let's see. Zero taxes in retirement. Yes, that's very possible. When you say zero taxes, well, we have to plan for that. We have to make a strategy earlier on and make sure that what you're saving, I mean, if you're depending on Social Security, you're going to pay tax on Social Security unless your income is really low. So just about everything that most people save in is going to be taxed, but there is a way to strategize to where you will have zero taxes in retirement. Advise clients in Florida and Maryland? Absolutely. All 50, I think. Yeah, all 50 states. Yeah, why not? Let's see. What about IULs? IULs are amazing. We can totally talk about IULs, but that's going to take a little bit more time. Let's see. Financial literacy curriculum you'd recommend for children. Let me come up with something, and we can have that ready in maybe about a week or two. Let's see. Okay, did I hit anything? It sounds like we need quarterly sessions. I'd love to. Anything else? Anybody else? Did I miss anything? Everybody's quiet. Wanda, where are you? Let's see. I am absolutely loving these questions.
There's a question early on. It says, what role does marriage play in our median net worth? And then somebody else talked about our homes very often being single parent homes.
Marriage. I will say that marriage is usually a benefit, but the problem that marriage creates is when you suddenly become, let's say you become a widow, and there's something called the widow's penalty. And the widow's penalty is what happens when you go from a 2-income family, and then suddenly someone passes away, and now there's one spouse left, you're down one income, and now you're taxed at a higher rate because you're single. So marriage in and of itself is great. And if you're married filing jointly, that's great. You get some tax benefits, but as you get older in age, you don't typically have a home to pay off, hopefully. All of your deductions are kind of gone. Your kids are out of the house. You don't have any deductions. And now you're being taxed on your savings at the highest income rate, because now it's a two income, you know, you've got Social Security, you've got 401k savings, you've got pension income, you've got all these different incomes that come in, and it might throw you into a higher tax bracket depending on how you saved your money. So marriage usually is a benefit, but occasionally it can be a detriment, and it definitely can throw you into a loop once you're retired, if your spouse passes away and now you're suddenly in a higher tax bracket. So there's a lot of things. That's why we definitely do recommend having just a conversation about, you know, a financial roadmap to see where you're headed and how, and there usually is, there's some way to kind of, you know, prepare for those what ifs in life, which is what we like to do. We can definitely make some recommendations to that end. I hope that answered your question.
And
Can you address I've heard a couple of reports where they've talked about how Americans have been led astray with this whole 401k thing, and it did not serve us well. People are finding it difficult to retire because of that. What do either of you have an opinion on that? Because I'm hearing it so often now, and it's really a shame because, you know, lay people, we don't understand all this gibberish. You know, we just like you said, you were putting your money away and you thought it was there, and then you find out it's not. So, you know, the American people have been moved from a position of, okay, I got $500 and 500 of it is mine, or at least 400 of it is mine, to we just don't know. And the government put nothing in place to educate us. And we're just left at the whims of these organizations who are out to make money. And it's just a shame.
yeah, Helen, I'm going to let you take it over, Jacalyn, but I'm just going to mention that they have a whole movie that has been made called The Baby Boomer Dilemma, that we used to share, that actually talks about that whole theme of what you just said in regards to how is the person with the least amount of information put in charge of something so crucial without any proper education on how to be able to manage their retirement once these 401s were designed. And, you know, it has definitely put us at a disadvantage, but I'm going to let Jacalyn go ahead and answer us.
You know what? That's a passion of mine. I will say that the 401k, there's a lot behind that. Yes, was it designed to make companies wealthy? Yes, it was. Was it actually the best thing for most retirees? No, probably not. Because basically you put a bunch of novices into the stock market system, and our parents said, oh, I'm not going to invest in stock. You know, that's risky. I'm going to lose my money. And why would I do that? I'd rather just put my money in the bank where it's safe and I'm not going to lose any of my hard-earned savings. And guess what? They repackaged it in the name of a 401k. So 401ks are basically a compilation of stock. So when the stock market goes up, you make money. When the stock market goes down, you lose money. It's pretty simple. And who benefited? Those companies that, you know, that run those stock market, you know, the fees and all that kind of stuff anyway. So long story short, 401ks actually benefit you when your company is matching. Free money is always better than no money. Free money is always better, you know, so yeah, you take advantage of the match, but sadly, many people don't understand the negative results of overfunding. They figure I'm going to overfund my 401k and I'm going to catch up and I'm going to do all this and I'm going to overfund the match. I'm going to put more in because I have a little extra. And sadly, that's going to create a bigger tax burden on them in retirement. Those are little things that most people don't know. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that's going on in that industry. Let's see, what else is going on? The government keeps moving the
There's a question that I think C. Johnson has her hand up too.
Yes, C, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm just bringing some information to the floor.
Mhm.
When you were talking about housing, there has been a move afoot, and I'm speaking to this as somebody in the room, but not a deciderer, if you catch my drift,
Okay.
that the plan is to make the American citizenry renters, kind of like how you rent a car, lease a car.
Mhm.
That has been the plan. So somebody put in the chat about why are all these corporations buying up housing? And that was no accident in terms of driving up the value of properties. There were certain zip codes, certain communities that were handpicked for that, for the Blackstones and the other different conglomerates who generated ownership of the housing stock post the mortgage meltdown in 2008, right? And
Wow.
I worked in that space in terms of trying to help to rebuild the economy and put rules and guardrails around it. I didn't know at the time that all you needed was $50,000 to open your own mortgage company. 50,000. And it
Mm.
didn't even have to be your money. You and 5 friends could have put that together and created ABC Mortgage Company. To some
Wow.
degree, you can still do that, but now there's licensing and other guardrails in place to prevent that from happening. And that's why disproportionately the Black community was targeted, because housing was the one way that we were holding wealth. That was how we were able to pass down um, income from generation to generation. But there's a number of factors that have impacted the economy. And one thing I would talk about, especially now that we're in the midst of one of these crises, when the properties get washed away like they did in Katrina,
Mhm.
ownership and land records disappear. So if you have had family-owned property, air property in your home, in your community for generations, if you have no proof of ownership of that land, then you can't reclaim it. So the people in North Carolina right now who may have had farms handed down from generation to generation, depending on where it was or how it was granted, gifted, or whatever, they really need to try and find their land records, their ownership, whatever, to show that they have interest in the property. And those are things that we don't think about because we've never had to deal with those. But as you talk about the boomer generation, we've lived through a whole lot of drama. If they think the people in the Great Depression ran through some stuff, we are living through some stuff. So in terms of the 401ks versus the pension, that was deliberate. But the thing that happened that impacted the 401k rollout is we had a 9/11. And whereas certain companies had had the intent to help facilitate the knowledge transfer, all of that got disrupted with 9/11.
Mm.
So I was working with one of the transition entities. The first trillion-dollar firms in this country was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Back in the 1980s and 90s, they were the first trillion-dollar companies. And what happened with Fannie Mae, if you've not seen The Big Short or those movies, you really need to go look at it and understand how stuff was structured and realigned. Because that has impacted home ownership and mortgages and all of those things. And a Fannie Mae and a Freddie Mac got constructed as government sponsored enterprises to bail the US economy out of war. And as trillion-dollar corporations, when the market crashed in 2008, Bush called in the head of those two organizations that Monday morning and told them all, effective immediately, the government owns your business ventures. You are no longer in charge of those ventures. And they stole the money that was in the retirement fund, like an Enron, from all the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac employees to course correct and put the economy back on track and put those two entities into receivership. The stock value went from about 140 down to 0, maybe hovering around 30 cents on the pink sheet. And neither of those companies have come back as yet, but the intent is that they will. But who's going to end up owning that housing stock? Is it a Blackstone? Is it the other firm out of Canada? You got to look and see who's owning and driving these things. So there's things that we need to be able to do. And one last point, you talked about generating information for the youth. It needs to happen. It's happening in other communities. It's not happening in ours. My little nephew went to kindergarten in Boca Raton, Florida, came home at 5 years old, teaching me how to read the Wall Street Journal because they were teaching them, that population, what to look for, how to pick a portfolio, how to monitor it, what is a credit score, how do you earn it, how do you retain it. 5 years old, that's what they're teaching their children. So we are definitely behind. So that's why I put in there, can we have a quarterly lesson? Because we really need this.
Absolutely. That sounds like fun. I mean, yeah, we could talk about this all day, every day, but very, very pertinent information. And see if you have the time to, like, I mean, are there any articles or something? Because I'd like to pick up where you just left off on that. Because you're absolutely right. And some of that Wanda mentioned and Helen put in the chat, the baby boomer dilemma, and some of the information that was actually, shared with the public about how all that happened. Super, super important, because we can't ignore our history. You got to know what happened and how we got where we are. And so definitely we need to pick that up and make sure that everybody is very aware of what's going on. But that's part of our mission, is to make sure that we keep this conversation alive so that people don't, repeat what's already happened, or at least they can keep their ears open. I know here in Los Angeles, I would concur that there is a plan to make everybody a renter, because if you understand, especially in the city of Los Angeles, all of the rules, all of the like leases or whatever, if you're a landlord, your tenant really doesn't have to listen to you at all. If they've ever rented with you, now you have to pay to move a tenant out now. Even if they break the rules, even if they do, anything wrong, basically the lease is, it doesn't matter. The tenant is now the owner of the home, and you are just the facilitator paying all the bills, period. So all of the rules, if you start understanding what's been happening to business owners who used to do business as, in other words, being a landlord was their business, they're being eroded out of that. You also see, like when I walked into a CVS the other day, and the rules here in Los Angeles, where you can walk in and you can just steal, you can just clear off a shelf, as long as you don't take more than $900 out of that store, $900 value, you can just walk out and they're not going to prosecute you. Do you know that the CVSs, especially in the Black neighborhoods, they're being hit by 5, 6, 7, 8 people a day that come in with trash bags and just clear the shelves, and they walk out like Santa Claus with stuff on their back, and nobody says a word. And it's happening in the Black neighborhoods, and the legislature is just like, hey, we were just filling up our jail cells. So, we don't want to overpopulate our jail cells with criminals. So let's just take all the rules away where it's okay for you just to steal from CVS. Well, you know what's going to happen. CVS is going to shut their doors, and it's going to lead to a more blighted neighborhood. And it's just going to devalue the property surrounding it for a temporary time, until either the people walk away, or they lose their property, or they can't sell it, or whatever, or they leave en masse to go to a nicer neighborhood. And guess what? Somebody else or some corporation gets to come and buy it all up. So I would totally agree with you on that. The fact that there is a concerted effort to create blighted neighborhoods in predominantly African-American neighborhoods, so that they will get out and sell for cheap, so that they can come and take over. Okay, so I totally agree. So let's see, where are we? Okay, Wanda. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jacalyn.
Go ahead. No, I like that.
What I do want to let everyone know is I just put in the chat, and I'm also going to share a slide at the end, but just in case some people have to go, I put in the chat information about, we talked about the fact that people need to make sure that they protect, mortgages, and what does that look like, and so on. There is a Zoom seminar on mortgage protection that I would like to share for those persons that may be interested, so that some colleagues are going to be doing tomorrow, related to how you can protect your mortgage. It's about 30 minutes, and the time is there, but I believe it's your time zone. It's a little later. It's like 9 p.m., but it's about 30 minutes. And then I also put a link for a Google Doc for those persons who want to talk more about. I know there was questions about the IUL. The IUL is something that we all should know about, because it is something that if you are either retired or in the process of retiring, or even earlier on, it's something that can benefit you, and it's something that you can have more control over how your retirement is growing, or something to even supplement. It's a lot of information, and I know that we don't want to just bombard you with information that you're not going to necessarily understand all of right now, because there's a lot of different topics being discussed. But we would love to be able to talk to you more about how that works, so that you do have an understanding, because even if not for yourself, for your children, they need to understand that they should not just be looking at their pension or 401, because after we've already talked, there's so many different challenges that occur when, with these pensions, and even with the 401s, and the lack of information. And so if you use the Google Doc form, and gives you opportunity to talk about things that you may want to talk about. And one of the things that I will ask Jacalyn to talk about that we didn't talk about, that I think that is very important, especially for those of us who are older, that need to live, is living benefits. If you could just talk briefly, Jacalyn, about the living benefits. And I also put my number, so those of you who may be a little challenged with the Google Doc, whatever, you can just text that number and say wealth, and we'll get back to you. Put your name. I didn't put that on it. Put your name and put text wealth, and I'll know that to get back to you regarding whatever it is that you're interested in. But Jacalyn, if you could talk a little bit about living benefits, because we all also need to know about that, especially as we're looking at long-term care and other things that are related to that.
Absolutely. Okay. And in a nutshell, many of us, I mean, I know everybody, the concept, and I don't know why there was this concept. Everybody seems to think that the cost of living will go down as soon as we retire. In other words, I'm going to be able to live on less. And for whatever reason, everybody seems to think, like I'm thinking about teachers in particular. Teachers go to school, they work their butts off, and then they go to retire, and they're supposed to retire on 60% of their current salary. And last I checked, the cost of living goes up on everybody, not only the working people, but the retired people too. So how are we supposed to survive? So let's think about when you call living benefits, why is that even a thing? I'll say, for example, as we get older, many of us have medical issues, and most people know that the number one cause of bankruptcy is usually medical bills. And people say, well, I've got health insurance. Well, yeah, you do, as long as you've, got a job. But health insurance doesn't pay the mortgage. It doesn't pay your lights, water, gas. It doesn't put food on your table. Recently, my mom just had open heart surgery, and she's 85. And, thankfully that she's doing okay. She's on the mend. But through that process, I realized that there's a lot of expenses that aren't covered by Medicare. There's like the copay that goes on to the IV medicines that she had to take once she got out of the hospital, and she had to do that at home. And that meant that, they're now pushing people out of the hospital to do, to recover at home. But that means that somebody has to take off work to take care of someone who needs to recover like that. And praise God that I had that ability. But how do you pay for someone to step away from their job to take care of a person who needs to recover at home or needs 24-hour IV care, you need extra money. So that means in retirement and as we get older, we need to have living benefits in place. Living benefits meaning we have access to another source of funds that we can tap into if we have a critical or chronic illness, such as a heart attack or cancer or stroke or prostate cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever it is that we need to take care of our loved ones, because that's what happens as we get older. What if we have to put mom into a adult daycare? What if we have to put dad into some type of a memory care? Where's that money coming from? That means the child who's in their 40s or 50s, who's almost at retirement, has to start dipping into their retirement funds in order to give mom or dad proper care. So if mom or dad had something called living benefits already, then that's usually part of some type of a life insurance product, something like either an annuity or a life insurance product. If that's the case, then they can tap into their death benefit without having to mess with their retirement savings. So that's a way to actually offset some of these higher level of expenses that will happen as we break the hip, as we have a fall, as we have to have some kind of surgery. I mean, and ideally, we will have that in place when our kids are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, that we will definitely make sure that people have living benefits, because that's something that's been around since the late 80s, but most people aren't even familiar with it. And that's a way that many cultures and many communities are able to survive a medical crisis, because they have this newer insurance they already have this newer insurance. They're putting the newer insurance policies into place. That's how these people are creating these trust funds, because they have living benefits. They have access to more money. So can you imagine that if someone you knew was diagnosed with breast cancer? This is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. They were diagnosed with breast cancer. If they were my client, I would be so thankful that I had placed them with a policy that would pay them out, let's say a check, in the event that they got diagnosed with breast cancer. Would it be okay if I gave you a check for $250,000 if you were diagnosed with breast cancer? That could allow you to stay home and recover properly without feeling the burden of going back to work. That would allow you to put food on the table, to keep Johnny in that expensive private school, whatever. But it's a way that people are offsetting these medical bills that are occurring as we get older. It just happens. I mean, I have a husband who has been diagnosed with bladder cancer. Sadly, we didn't have this kind of policy on him, which means that any additional expenses that go into taking care of him, if it's not covered by health insurance, it's coming out of our pocket, which is a real quick way to erode your 401k, is a real quick way to have to sell your home, as Helen just put. If you get diagnosed with cancer and you got to pay all those extra bills, or you don't have the right kind of health insurance and you're paying something where you're paying 20% of $1 million, well, guess what? You end up having to sell your home. So those are the kind of things that we try to offset by putting proper protection in place. That also goes for mortgage protection. What if you suddenly were diagnosed with cancer? Guess what? You would get a check to be able to pay your bills and to continue to make your mortgage payments. So those are the kind of things that we really, really, really do highly encourage. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to Wanda. We'll make sure that we get you that information right away. That's the Protect My Mortgage event that's happening tomorrow, I believe. If success is so tenable, well, again, staying ahead of it, knowing what resources you have out there, minimizing your taxes, taking advantage of the strategy that wealthy people take advantage of. Most of the information is right here, is very available in books. We just have to read those books. So we have to talk to somebody like Wanda and get all the inside tips real quick. So C, let's see. It depends. It depends. It's either a life insurance product or it could be an annuity product. It just depends. It depends on what the client needs. So any other questions? You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I'm busy trying to look through the chat and whatever. And I hope that this information is information that's been helpful. You know, we started off talking about, again, the 2053 prediction that could be very, very real if people like ourselves don't take the time to share information like this and to start thinking about how are we going to change any habits that we have that are not going to allow us to be financially successful in the future, and they're not going to be able to benefit our young people that we are responsible for and love. You know, what can we do in regards to making sure that we are taking the steps to reverse? You know, part of it is listening to presentations like this, but the main part of it is taking the time to actually do something about what you've heard. Because if you just listen and the information stays with you and no one else hears the information or uses the information, then basically what's happening is you're hearing something and it's good, but you're keeping it to yourself. And so it's not benefiting anyone else. And so the whole part of doing what I do and what Jacalyn does really is about sharing the information, because this is not something that I knew 7 years, or I would say 8 years ago. You know, in my 50s, I didn't think there was anything that I could do to change my situation. And by the grace of God, I heard this information. I took advantage of it. And I had the opportunity to now put myself in a situation where I can now look at how I'm going to create generational wealth for other persons that are in a younger or that are younger. I don't have my own children, but I feel it's important for me to leave a legacy. And so nieces, nephews, little cousins, persons that I know that will receive the information and be able to utilize the information that we are sharing now to be able to benefit from once they receive money to be able to have to use are the persons that I am trying to leave a legacy behind and do something positive to make a difference in my community. And so that's just something that I'm doing, but we all can do something, you know, share information, take the time. And in regards to young people and hearing this information, although Jacalyn said that she didn't have a class, I do have classes that I have taught to young people about financial literacy. And it is a sad situation that we don't have this information in our schools, but we don't have to wait for the schools to provide it. It should be provided in the homes, just like we were talking about other cultures. They're establishing bank accounts, understanding how to utilize the stock market. All of these things, people are sitting at the table with the escrows are closing. So they may not understand everything, but they will at least be exposed so they know that this is a transaction that's very important, that's related to a house. And there's nothing wrong with that. We have got to stop doing what our generation, I mean, our parents and grandparents did and say that this is grown folk business. This is everybody's business, because when it's all said and done, who is going to take care of who? The people that you're shooing away from the table, if it's young people like myself, when my mother and grandparents used to shoo us away. I ended up taking care of my mother, and at 20-something years old, I lost her, and I didn't have the information that I wish I had now. And so, you know, what are you going to provide for your children when you are no longer here? Will they know what to do? Are we talking to them? Are we taking the time? Please, let's not leave our young people behind with no information. The crazy thing, we leave them with resources, but we don't leave them with any type of manual or information on how to use those resources properly. And so they get taken advantage of. And we shouldn't do that. You know, if otherwise, just use it for yourself. Because if you leave money behind, like my mother did for my sister, 6 figures, and within a few, well, she might have had it for a few years, but it was nothing by the time that she should have had it. And she did everything but what my mother would have anticipated that she do. But who was teaching her? So on that note, if there are other questions, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Helen. I really thank you. I thank you, Jacalyn, for sharing this time with me. And I hope that everybody on the call learned something and will take the time to use the information. What we provide is free. It's something that if you talk to any financial advisor, which we don't claim to be, but if you talk to any financial advisor, that you literally have to have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in order to sit down and talk in detail. Your job plan is never going to sit down and take this type of time. And this is why so many of us don't know this information. So I thank you again. And I look forward to hopefully getting a chance to talk to you, personally, or even have another time to talk about the information as a group, because Helen has provided this opportunity for me and others to talk. And it's something that we very much need, because in addition to the fact that we got to select the right president and the right other officials, local and state, we also have to know what we need to know so that we can make the right decisions. Thanks again.
Thank you, ladies. This has been quite informative.
Thank you, Cindy.
And of course, Wanda, you know that mi casa is su casa. Whenever you want to come, you can come and share information with us at any time. Before I let Wanda and Jacalyn go, are there any questions that anybody just has as a burning question? If so, just unmute yourself and ask it. I'm trying to do two things at once here. And if not, we can wrap it up and say good night. I do want to say that the election is around the corner. I cannot believe it's here, but it is. I sent out an email to the group. I'll put a plug here. On Thursday night, we're going to get together, and I'm going to put this link in the chat so that you all can watch this film. And if you watch it in advance, so we can be prepared to talk about it on Thursday, we'll gather online to discuss it. But it's about president. So apparently every year, every presidential election, the PBS Frontline does a documentary on who are the front runner, who are the candidates. And I'm putting it in the chat right now, sorry. So if you all can watch this film and we can be ready to talk about it, that would be great. Because the thing that I need you all to recognize is to check your registration. Even if you think you're registered, they are pulling people off of the rolls without them knowing it. So you want to make sure that you are registered for real. And you also want to vote in person. Do not vote by mail. Donald Trump's guy is still the Postmaster General, so I wouldn't go trust in the mail. So what they're saying is for people to vote early and to vote in person. See, you have your hand up. You have another question, babe?
She may not have taken it down from before, I'm not sure.
No, I put it down, so okay. So anyway, just we can stick around and talk for a little bit more, but just keep that in mind, get ready. I think if you're not registered to vote, or if you have people who aren't registered to vote, I know here in Florida, you have up until 29 days before the election, which means we have another day or two. So check your local state and see what it's telling you to do, how much time you have to not only register, to make sure that you are still registered. And let's just get out here and do this thing. So on that note, I will say good night. I will stop recording, and like I said, we can hang out for another minute or so. And Jacalyn and Wanda, hope to see. Thank you for today, and come again, Jacalyn. I know Wanda will, and hopefully you will too.
Wanda's always hanging out with the happening people. So, you know, I will definitely be on her coattails. Hey, Wanda. Hey, Wanda. So definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I do hope that I'll get invited back. So
May I ask? I don't mean to
Yes.
interrupt, but I'm just curious about Black billionaires and how actively engaged they are in fighting this tide, particularly you're in California. I think of celebrities. I think of these groups that are buying up properties in the Black neighborhood, and I just get so aggravated and feel so powerless about how do we stop this. The education is great, but are there other things that we can be doing um, to defend ourselves and protect ourselves? And I
Protect
don't mean to
ourselves.
put this on Black billionaires, but they do have more resources than the average Jane like myself.
Well, I'll just tell you, one of the things that happened here right down the street from my house, there's a mall that was built, and I actually was one of the first business owners as a young 23-year-old. That was one of the things that I did with the legacy my mother left behind, was to establish a business in the community that I would always in. And I hired a lot of the young people. And then over the years, things happened with this mall, and it changed. I actually was Black owned at one time, but now it's been kind of blighted for a good little minute. And so there was an opportunity for that mall to be bought. Well, people in the community that wanted to get together and buy the mall, there was so much dissension between the various leaders, Black leaders that wanted to participate in this purchase, that ultimately it went to the very people that they were trying to keep it from getting, which was people that were associated with Trump. And so this mall now, even though it is kind of like a shadow of the mall that it was, it still has a few business. It pretty soon will be one of those businesses that will shut down and be mixed retail use, and people like us will be nowhere in sight, you know. And so a lot of it has to do, to me, with us understanding how to work better together, because there was actually a good opportunity for the last group to purchase it. They supposedly had raised the money, but they were so much fighting among them as to who was going to take control that they weren't even allowed to be in the running for that situation. And you know, if they would have been able to come together and put together a plan that didn't involve us fighting against one another, I think that would happen. So part of what I see is that we have got to start the understanding that we have got to work together and not always want to be the one on the top. We have to collaborate, and you know, so that we can, you know, work. We can be in a position to be able to be in ownership. In addition to, once we do get in that position, put our dollars, you know, where our mouth is, because you can't just talk about doing something if you're not going to put your money together. And we have the money, but when we get it, you know, it's not just the Black billionaires, because I mean, obviously, you know, they have a lot of money, and yeah, it'd be good if they thought like me, because with me, all the dollars that I can use toward helping somebody else before I leave this earth, that's what I'm going to do. But you know, everybody doesn't think that way. So why, it doesn't take a billionaire, it just takes people like you and me to be able to put those resources together and just be honest. And we have enough lawyers and professionals that understand how to do things. You know, we can do it. That's just my.
And
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before we let these lovely ladies go? I'm going to take everybody off spotlight. We can do our regular farewell. Wanda, again, thank you so much. Okay, so see, your hand is still up. I don't know if you have a question or not. I'm going to say you don't. There's only a few of us left on here, so
I do, Helen. I don't know what's going on this time with Zoom, but I'm constantly getting kicked out. There was one thing I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. This past year, if you are a homeowner, your homeowner's policies are increasing by about 50%, depending on the state that you're living in. If you're of the habit of paying your insurance in your escrow, you need to take a look at it, because insurance companies are pulling out of different markets. They're not giving advance enough notices, especially in the case in Florida and other communities. And what's
California.
happened, and as a consequence of that, depending on also the value of your property, it may be considered uninsurable if it's over like 500K, depending on the markets that you're in. Nobody's writing there. They're also taking a look at your roofs. So if your roof is older than 10 years old, they're flying drones. They're looking at Google Sky and taking a look at that to determine whether or not they will write policies for you. So if you have a home, and all of you still should have home insurance on it for events like what we just saw happen with the hurricanes, you need to take a close look at the policy, see if it has the value for rebuilding, and also shop around, because they're going up on an average 50%. So please, please take a look at that so you don't find yourself in an awkward situation. That's all I wanted to say, Helen. Thank you.
yeah, that actually happened to a friend of mine in New York. It's devastating. And not only did his insurance double, but as C just said, the insurance agent let them know, like, I don't know, a month or two in advance, and didn't try to help them find a new policy. And here I live in West Palm. I live in West Palm Beach, and in this county and in Florida, people are moving out not because they can't afford the taxes, but because they can't afford the homeowners insurance. So I don't know when our government starts somebody said, what do we do to protect ourselves? I don't know, because we have a complicit government that's not looking to protect us. They're in bed with the lobbyists and these big corporations, and they're not. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the situations that we find ourselves in. I mean, who gives up their house because they can't afford the darn your homeowner's insurance is more than your mortgage payments, or it's just ridiculous. But that's where we are.
Out here in
Absolutely. Mine went from 2,500 to 40,000. And I'm not coastal property.
Wow.
I've been able to get it reduced a bit, but next year, what am I going to face? So decisions need to be made. So warning.
And they're even saying that these state programs that are these state insurers that are supposed to be helping, they won't even provide the proper reimbursement, when they have the damages, that they are undercutting what is supposed to be the cost of the repair replacement value. So you can't even really trust that's going to be a benefit to you. Out here in California, which you probably have heard, that most of the companies have pretty well pulled out, and they're like basically moved. The rest of them are kind of in the process of doing so. And and a lot of that is because, and unfortunately, it just seems that no matter what happens with other folk, good or bad, we take the fall for it, because most of us do not live in the areas where they're being burnt out. The properties are sinking in the ground. Their properties are sliding down the hills and whatever, at least in California, that look like me. There are other people, but we're the ones paying the price when it comes down to, like you said, the insurance costs. And so these are all things that, we've got to be thinking about, because it's kind of like another form of inflation, so to speak. What do we have in place to be able to offset that, besides also obviously looking at who we are voting into offices in some of these state, elections and such, that hopefully maybe make a difference. I don't know.
All right, folks, this has been wonderful. I'm going to say, when Black women gather, what happens?
Amazing
things happen.
Amazing things happen.
Thank you for another amazing Sunday, and I'll see you next week.
See you.
I'll see you Thursday night. Thursday, I hope. Thursday is when I'll see you. All righty. I'm gonna stop recording and we'll say good night.